Ready? Dalicia Davis. I hail from the University of Minnesota. Go Vikings. No. Packers fans in the house. I don't want to offend you all. I kid. But give me a second here. So I'm here today because of a partnership that began 20 plus years ago. That was a partnership with the University of Minnesota, the Minnesota Landscape Arboretum, and the Messiah Lutheran Church in South Minneapolis. That is me, circa 1996, I think. And that picture was actually taken in the first inner city youth garden that was a product of that partnership that I just mentioned. So I was a member of that first group of youth gardeners. I love sharing my story because it's a prime example of the connection that exists between the Master Gardener program and the community, and then also the impact that the program has had and can continue to have if we kind of are conscious about making efforts to diversify and make our program more diverse. And then, of course, better serve or better engage our underserved communities, and then attract a more diverse pool of volunteers. So that program then was known as City Fresh Produce. It still exists today, and it's expanded so tremendously. I always, like, when I meet some of the younger kids today and the events that they do, I always refer to myself as an OG. Like, I'm the original gardener. I started this. I was one of the founding members, per se. But today it's known as Growing Good. I don't know, maybe some of you have come across like the curriculum or heard about it. And so, of course, through that experience, I was introduced to Master Gardener volunteers who were very passionate about their work. It was fascinating to me at the time. Like, we had these people who look so differently. I mean, most of us were kids of color. We come from the inner city. Kind of low, not poor, but lower income. So it's fascinating that we were exposed to folks who were so passionate about the work that they were doing and so willing to engage us. And that kind of attests to that. The last part of that Benjamin Franklin quote involved me and I learned. I know that is definitely the case for me and other kids that did the youth garden work. And so, you ready? Go ahead.
So just putting our own stories within this, you can see how we're, I also grew up in Minnesota, in northern Minnesota, and we had a huge garden with a spinach patch and a compost pile that I hated, schlepping the compost all the way up there. I always thought I was going to get like taken away by aliens or something. And we had a raspberry patch. And you might say that a low-income kid can't have access to organic local produce, but I did. And so just sharing how we all come to this from different places and we only represent ourselves. And so these are just a couple stories about how we come to gardening. And I wanted to share this tool with you that I gained through Navigating Difference, which is a workshop that Washington Extension created. And so this is a tool that that can be used to start to think about who we are. So at the very center is personality. So if you have ever known twins, you'll know that they are completely different people if they have the same genetics. So we have different personalities. And then with the internal dimensions, those are the ones that you see when we walk up here today. So you can see maybe our age, maybe our gender, maybe our race, maybe our ethnicity, maybe our physical activity. We also have our sexual orientation there. And then as we get further out, kind of depends on if you find out these things about people or if people are willing to share them or these external dimensions, the place where I feel like gardening fits in is as a personal habit. And we think that, as other speakers talked about today, we think like, oh, everybody should love gardening. But then it turns out, based on the research that Sherry Dorn was talking about and that all of you have done studies about, is that we are a very specific group of people. And maybe that's the gardening, maybe it's the volunteering, but we do fit into this. So I often say like the Master Gardener program is like for me plus 20 or 30 years, just to place myself in that. So some of you might be tree experts, and what I'm slowly learning about trees is that the moment you plant it, you have written its entire history, that it will thrive or it will not, just based on how things were set up. And so I'm kind of curious about the history. I know on Monday night we did talk a little bit about the history, so I wanted to take you through some of those points to see, like, were we planted this way? Was the Master Gardener program intentionally made this way? And what can we start to do to get ourselves out of that rut? So what year were the land grants created? One person clearly say it out loud. Go for it. It's okay. 1862. So who was considered a person, someone who had standing and could do things in 1862? White men with property. How old did you have to be? Maybe 18. Who was even considered white in 1862? So like Irish, that wasn't white. Italian, Jewish, that wasn't white. Sexual orientation?
No such thing then.
Okay. Physical ability? I've heard that people were turned away at immigration because they were sick, because they didn't have a land or whatever it was. So at the creation of the land grants, we talk about how proud we are of being a land grant institution, and we also have to think, like, who created land grants and for who? Another big question is, so like in the simple reading of the land grant, it says, the sale of land is what created the land grant. Who had the land and why? So I'm just gonna go back to my notes. So in 1830, that's when the Indian Removal Act was, I mean, this was an act to forcibly remove people from their land. It had already been happening, but that was when it was made national policy. And then in 1887, we've got the Dawes Act, which meant that what little land holdings a tribe was given were usually lost up to 75% of that additional land. And I challenge you all to think about your state name and the name that you have on your name tag. It probably is named by or after a tribe. So the first time that I met an Iowa person, they said, "You're from Iowa, huh?" I said, "Yeah." They said, "Well, I'm Iowa." And it's something that we have to know. We have to learn, what does the state name mean? Who gave it that name? So a little bit of research that I did was that Wisconsin is a Miami name, and it's for the river running through the Red Plains, just talking about sandstone. So please look into that and think about, like, why is it called a land grant and whose land, who was on that land? And then in 1914, cooperative extension was made. This was before women even had the right to vote, right? So it was focused on rural, it was focused on farmers, which farmers would equal white male probably at this time. So we've got a lot of history leading up to where we are, and we've only made it so far. And so then we come to the 1970s and the creation of the master in an urban area to focus on urban horticulture questions. And historically Black colleges, and there are land-grant institutions that serve Native Americans. Well, could tell me, but I believe that we only exist at the white land-grant institutions.
Not Delaware State University is a 1890s and Western Virginia there. So, and I think Georgia.
Delaware, okay. Wonderful, yeah. Things I need to know, things I need to read. So just for me, it's helpful to look at this history and just to look at how we got here. And then we have some ideas that have already been shared, but we can build upon.
Yeah. So again, maintaining those connections and relationships that I'm a product of, opening doors for youth who may have an interest in maybe horticulture, or I guess exposing them to that at an early age, kind of can pave the way for them. I know it did for me. A lot of the skills that I learned that relate to horticulture and life, I can kind of apply to what I do now. My work now is involving creating learning opportunities for our volunteers that are engaged with the communities that they serve. We kind of discussed some of the barriers that stop folks' participation. We know that the program isn't for everyone, but maybe we can pique new folks' interest. In the interview, in the recruitment process, like, are we asking the right questions? Are we up a lot? Our program offers scholarships on kind of like a case-by-case basis, so that's something the core course and the time and days that they happen on. So perception of the program, because I've heard from members of the community that it seems kind of exclusive and they don't have the background or the education to be able to capacity. So let me just take a look here. Just another note. And then the bulk of our volunteer group, and so we want to kind of be mindful of that. Of course, they help to build the program, but then we want to look at the fact that millennials are going to transition into doing what they do in the community. We want to attract them and make our program appealing to them. And then another tip, adjusting the language. So Tim, fun fact, Tim Kinney is my boss now. He was my boss then. So when I was a youth gardener, he was my boss. Pretty cool. But anyway, no, he's been a great mentor. And a lot of the things that I've learned and what I'm doing now, he's been instrumental in, and I do appreciate that. So Sue noted that, like, the etymology of why the term Master Gardener was chosen, that comes up a lot, like the name and the negative connotation it has, like particularly with my. So and then Sarah Eichberger, who is now with MSU, you guys probably know her. She and then what materials and workshops, so that's something that, and I know in our discussion at lunch, like, one of the things I want to do through the diversity efforts that I'm doing at the U of M is creating our materials, some of maybe our basic materials, like becoming a volunteer and things, in different languages. As it occurred to me, like, we serve these communities and a lot of their, first language is in English. So why don't we make those materials available in their language? And last, did I go too far? Okay. So building cultural competency. I was looking at that graphic and I kind of felt like where state staff is, maybe community should fit in. I don't know. But I feel like what we're doing should come from the community because our work is serving them. So maybe we start, which not that we're not already doing it, but maybe we do better about approaching community members and engaging them and figuring out what works best for them, what doesn't, things that we could do better, right? Another thing to note, I've been surveying, I surveyed our county coordinator statewide. We have a Master Gardener State Advisory Board. We've had discussions about this over the last few months. Just asking for like their ideas and input. One thing that's come up is preparing a lot of the things that are grown, like the vegetables that are grown. So that gave me an idea of like, maybe as part of diversity and inclusion, not being, I for the Minnesota program would like for it to be less structured, less like the traditional PowerPoint human resources approach. I wanted it to be a little bit more personal. So it gave me the idea of maybe formulating or finding a way to develop cooking courses, or not even courses, classes. So maybe we have 1 or 2 classes during the harvesting season. And I might act as a liaison to kind of connect coordinators with people locally that can kind of help to lead the class and teach about whatever particular vegetable they've harvested and how to cook it based on whatever culture they're trying. So that was an idea from that. At the state level, county level, both groups definitely connecting, sharing ideas and working together. And then of course we attend conferences, we learn from each other, we go to events, webinars, seminars, and then engage one another in our state committees and conversations about diversity and inclusion. And then just spread the word, do the best and spread the word. And, maintain our the relationship between our program and the community. So, and then I think I'll go over this. The subcommittee, a lot of you turned up today for lunch. Thank you for that. So this is another open invitation. I mean, it's not necessarily a dedication. So if you join and then you decide you don't have the time or it just doesn't work, you can definitely kind of fall back. But we actually have a conference meeting coming up. It's going to be Zoom. Okay, September 14th, and we can send you the details if you like. The goal, like we've been saying, of that subcommittee is to diversify our programs at the state level and then share ideas nationally. We want to be able to continue to do this work with, again, our seasoned volunteers kind of transitioning out of their roles. We need to bring in those fresh new faces and folks that are willing to do the work, and then continue to engage our community, because that's, I think, what it's all about. And we'll have more folks like me who might have been youth gardeners that grow up, and I never thought I'd come back to the U20 and work in the position that I'm in, but I'm definitely very grateful for it, and the fact that I started as a youth gardener has afforded me that opportunity. So you want to close out?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I share this quote from Ajima Olu, who is a really amazing author. You can look at her stuff. And I challenge you with this quote because, as someone who comes from multiple areas of the Italian culture, I don't have to see myself and I don't have to know myself. So it's really important to build our cultural competency needs, and also to know that we're not going to shift unless we start to see if things